Hello. Welcome back to STM Narratives. Before we begin, please comment where you are watching from and the time. The small town of Rivermount had always been the kind of place where life ambled along at a steady pace. The town square boasted a single grocery store, a diner, and a park with a creaky swing set that hadn't been updated in decades. Tall oak trees lined the narrow streets, their sprawling branches casting dappled shadows on the sidewalks below. To the untrained eye, Rivermount seemed peaceful, a postcard-perfect small town tucked between rolling hills. But those who lived there knew better. Rivermount was a town where the past hung thick in the air, like the sticky heat of summer. Beneath the friendly waves and polite smiles lay an undercurrent of division. Elijah Carter, one of Rivermount's few black residents, knew this better than most. At 34, Elijah, Eli to his friends, was no stranger to side eyes and whispers. Growing up in Rivermount, he'd been the quiet kid who worked hard, kept his head down, and avoided conflict. Now, as an adult, he still lived by those principles. But even his patience had limits. It was a blistering Saturday afternoon when Eli's day took a turn he couldn't have anticipated. His shift at the Rivermount diner had ended, and he was walking home along Ridgewood Lane, a shaded stretch of road just outside town. The cicadas buzzed loudly in the trees, their drone blending with the distant hum of a passing car. Eli was deep in thought, his work shoes kicking up small clouds of dust, when he spotted a small figure sitting by the roadside. It was a boy, no older than 10, with blonde hair matted to his forehead and a tear-streaked face. "Hey there, buddy," Eli called out gently, keeping his distance so as not to scare the boy. "You okay?" The boy looked up, startled. His wide blue eyes darted nervously before he quickly wiped at his face. "I'm fine," he muttered, though the tremble in his voice betrayed him. Eli crouched down, resting his arms on his knees. "You look like you've had a rough day. What's your name?" "Timmy," the boy said, his voice barely above a whisper. Eli offered a reassuring smile. "All right, Timmy. You out here by yourself?" Timmy hesitated, biting his lip. "I got lost. I was trying to get to my uncle's house, but I don't know where it is anymore." Eli's heart softened. The boy looked so small and frightened, sitting there with dirt smudged on his knees. "Where's your uncle's house? Maybe I can help you get there." Timmy gave a halting description. A white picket fence, a big oak tree in the yard, and a red truck parked in the driveway. It didn't take Eli long to place it. Rivermount was small, and he was pretty sure the house was a short walk away. "Well, I think I know the one," Eli said, standing and holding out his hand. "How about we walk there together? It's not too far." Timmy hesitated for a moment, then nodded. His small hand slid into Eli's, and together they set off down the dusty road. The house came into view after about 10 minutes. It was just as Timmy had described. A modest home with a white fence and a sprawling oak tree that dominated the front yard. A red truck sat parked crookedly in the driveway, its paint faded and scratched. "That's it," Timmy exclaimed, relief washing over his face. But as they neared the house, the front door banged open, and a burly man in a flannel shirt stormed out onto the porch. His face was flushed, his jaw tight. "Timmy," the man barked, his voice sharp and accusing. "Where the hell have you been?" Timmy shrank behind Eli, gripping his hand tighter. The man's gaze shifted to Eli, his expression darkening. "And who the hell are you?" Eli raised his hands in a placating gesture. "I found him on the road. He said he was lost, so I walked him home." The man stepped off the porch, his heavy boots crunching on the gravel. His eyes narrowed as he looked Eli up and down. "You're telling me you just happened to find him? Walking around with my nephew like it's no big deal?" Eli frowned, sensing the man's hostility. "Look, I was just trying to help. That's all." But the man wasn't listening. He squared his shoulders, his voice rising. "You think I'm stupid? You think I don't know what's going on here? You were trying to take him, weren't you?" Timmy tugged at his uncle's arm, his voice panicked. "Uncle Bob, no. He wasn't. He helped me." Bob yanked Timmy behind him, his eyes never leaving Eli. "Quiet, Timmy. You don't know what you're talking about." Eli took a step back, his hands still raised. "I don't want any trouble. I just wanted to make sure he got home safe. But Bob was already pulling his phone from his pocket. Yeah, well, the cops can sort this out. The arrival of the police brought a tense stillness to the air. Two squad cars pulled up, their lights flashing, and officers stepped out cautiously, their hands resting near their holsters. Eli explained the situation as calmly as he could, but the skeptical glances from the officers told him they'd already decided he was guilty of something. "Why were you with the boy?" one officer asked, his tone sharp. "I told you," Eli said, his voice measured. "I found him on the road, and he said he was lost. I walked him here to help." "Did you touch him?" Eli's jaw tightened, frustration simmering beneath his calm exterior. "I held his hand so he wouldn't trip. That's it." Timmy, to his credit, stood firmly by Eli's side. "He didn't do anything wrong," the boy cried, his voice cracking. "He's nice. He helped me." But Bob's accusations drowned him out. "You can't trust these people," he spat, gesturing toward Eli. "He had no business being with my nephew." The scene drew a crowd of neighbors, their murmurs blending into a low hum of judgment and curiosity. It was then that an unexpected voice cut through the noise. "That's enough." All heads turned to see Martha Green, a retired schoolteacher and one of Rivermount's most respected residents, stepping forward. Her silver hair was pulled into a neat bun, and her sharp blue eyes surveyed the scene with disapproval. "Mrs. Green, this doesn't concern you," Bob said, his voice faltering under her gaze. "It concerns me when I see someone being treated unfairly," Martha replied, her tone firm. She turned to the officers. "I saw the whole thing. Elijah was helping that boy. He did nothing wrong." Bob's face flushed a deeper red. "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Martha said, cutting him off. "You saw a black man with your nephew and jumped to the worst possible conclusion. That's racism, Bob, plain and simple." The murmurs among the crowd grew louder, some nodding in agreement while others exchanged uneasy glances. Bob opened his mouth to protest, but Martha held up a hand. "Don't even try to deny it. I've lived in this town long enough to know prejudice when I see it. And you," she added, pointing a finger at him, "owe that man an apology." The officers, now visibly uncomfortable, muttered something about the situation being resolved and left without further incident. The crowd slowly dispersed, though the tension lingered in the air. Eli turned to Martha, his shoulders sagging in relief. "Thank you, Mrs. Green. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in." Martha smiled warmly. "You don't need to thank me, Elijah. You were doing the right thing. I'm sorry you had to go through this." Eli nodded, though the weight of the day still pressed heavily on him. As he turned to leave, Timmy ran up to him, wrapping his small arms around Eli's waist. "Thank you," Timmy said, his voice muffled. Eli crouched down, meeting the boy's tearful eyes. "You're welcome, Timmy. Stay safe, all right?" As Eli walked away, Martha turned back to Bob, who stood awkwardly on the porch. "You need to take a long, hard look at yourself, Bob," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. "Think about what you just taught that boy, and think about what kind of man you want to be." Bob didn't reply, but the shame on his face was answer enough. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Eli returned home. The events of the day weighed heavily on him, but Martha's words echoed in his mind. Sometimes, standing up against ignorance and hatred felt like an uphill battle, but moments like today reminded him that change, however slow, was still possible.